I'm curious. I am curious. Curious.
By nature.
Jennifer Nardine. I'm a teaching and learning liaison librarian at Virginia Tech. I'm curious about pretty much everything, which is why I'm a librarian. It gives me the opportunity to find out something about a lot of different things.
So how did you get onto the topic of Halloween and become interested in Halloween?
It's sort of a two-pronged approach. I've been interested in Celtic culture for a long time, so I've dug around in that partly because of personal family history. Ireland is one of my big, here's where my genetics come from, locations, as is Scotland. And then on the other hand, I've been involved in theater, so I love the dressing up and the folklore that comes up behind things. And it all combined into how does this all work in terms of Halloween, which is sort of performance in a weird way, but it's performance of who people genuinely are in some ways, because you can become whatever inner persona you would really love to be for one day. And that includes the kids.
So why is Halloween significant and why does it exist today?
Reaching back, it used to be sort of attached to a harvest festival in the Celtic cultures, but it wasn't the same thing. The most important factor was on the night of the 31st. Theoretically, the veil between the two worlds, the dead and and the live people, were thin, so ghosts and fairies and either good or bad entities could move between the worlds. And so people started leaving offerings for deceased relatives or to keep negative spirits away, and they would dress up in costumes to hide from the bad spirits. And there was often sort of a community feeling about having the last outdoor hurrah before it got too cold to do anything significant outside without freezing. And then it came here, of course, with the immigrant populations, and very focused on children for a while. And it started evolving into what's going on now, after World War II, because there was so much rationing during the wars. But as sugar and things of that sort became more available, that's when people started making the candy to give to kids, and it was able to have more elaborate costuming than throwing a sheet over your head and being a ghost, or wearing somebody's old clothes and being, I hate to say this out loud because it's a non-politically correct term, but a hobo, that sort of traveling, unrooted person. So it evolved to what it is today. There were a couple of sidebars. Trick-or-treating used to actually involve kids playing tricks, and it got to a point where it wasn't just a fun little, here's my magic trick or whatever. They were actually doing damage to the areas. So the idea of trick-or-treating was more formalized and brought to mean what it is today. So a kid can do a trick on a doorstep to win their candy or whatever, but mostly they just walk around being cute.
Why is it specifically October 31st? That's the day when monsters, spirits, and fairies come out.
Well, originally it wasn't necessarily the 31st. The old calendar was based on equinoxes and solstices, dividing the year into 4 quarters. And the Halloween celebration would show up 40 days after the previous equinox, the fall equinox. So date shifted, but as time moved forward and we started having the standardized Roman calendar, it was locked into October 31st as this is the day. And technically speaking, for a long time was celebrated as starting on the evening of the 31st and going through the 1st until the following evening.
And why do you think that it's specifically this solstice that is considered more, I guess, oriented towards spirits and monsters?
Well, I think partly it's It reflects some of what's going on in the natural world. Things are dying back, where everybody's preparing, bringing in their crops and their animals and sort of moving into protective mode. And the world is more dark than light in a lot of parts of the globe. So it seems sort of natural for things related to the shadows and spooky things are more likely to pop out when there's more darkness for them to leverage rather than coming out at times where it's light at 10 at night.
Is Halloween related to the Day of the Dead in Mexico?
It is, in that it's looking at ancestors. It's talking about different spirits crossing the veil between the two worlds. But there are significant differences also. The Day of the Dead in Mexico is very family oriented, and mostly it's celebrated by, on the Day of the Dead, you go to your ancestor's grave with a picnic, and you have a picnic at the grave site, and they theoretically join you at the picnic. So it's sort of a reunion of sorts. Whereas with the Halloween, most of the time, the idea is to send everybody who has died in the last year through the veil to the other side. So escorting ghosts that have been waiting to move on, to let them do so. And anything that comes back through has more of a mischievous or malicious intent rather than a family reunion.
What other countries have these types of traditions and that focus around death or spirits?
Well, I think most countries have some sort of death ritual / celebration activity. Europe, for the very much so. But if you go to ancient Egyptians, religions, you've got talking with the god of the dead. Reach back into early Greek and Roman history. They had Hades and Persephone and things of that sort. There are global acknowledgments of sort of this changing of the seasons and needing time to die in order to refresh or come back. And even if you look at Christianity, there's that function of, Christ dies, he goes into his resting place, and that he reemerges again. So, and in that time, if people, I think, were praying, they were generally addressing the Holy Spirit, which is sort of kind of in the same zone as the ghosts or other spirits.
You mentioned how Halloween was brought to the United States by some of the early settlers, and that many of them were pagans.
The way Halloween became what it is today is that as Christianity started evolving, one of their strategies, the leadership, was to create a new holiday on or near the pagan holiday and continue to use a lot of the traditions from that pagan holiday, except convert it to be Christ-based. And of course, that meant things like magic was bad and it didn't exist, and there was no such thing as fairies, and that sort of thing. But people still would celebrate with food and drink, and they would get up and get in costume sometimes. So it was this continuation of, here's this day that is a holiday, one sort or another, but it's being moved from mythological or fantastical beliefs that the pagans held into something that fits more into the church mold. But I think the church understood that the playful aspect of Halloween still needed to stay up and running because it was a true celebration that people enjoyed.
And what time frame would you say that was?
That transition from sort of pagan and druidic beliefs to the Christian framing was a long time ago. As far as bringing it to the United States, it was when the various waves of immigrants came. So when the Irish came to the United States after the potato famine, or the Scots people came as part of the mining communities, that's when that started being wrapped further and further into our culture. And since there were communities of these various cultures scattered around the country to do the task they came to do, it was pretty easy for other people to learn about it.
It seems surprising to me how much, in order to kind of bring a new festivity or tradition into a country, there needs to be a number of people who are celebrating that. And it seems like these pagan traditions must have been a number of people celebrating them, which seems surprising. So I didn't know that. If you can talk about that a little bit more.
I think bringing the Halloween tradition forward wasn't necessarily due to the pagan populations in the United States in that they instigated and spread it around. But I do think that paganism in a lot of its forms are focused on nature-based beliefs and the same calendar that was going on centuries before in the British Isles. So there's that factor. But I think it wasn't that there was a new pagan movement and then suddenly they spread Halloween. It was that Halloween had become embedded enough in various more modern cultures by the time they started arriving over here that it just sort of spread and became prevalent across the United States.
Maybe we can talk now a little bit more about the other topics that you are involved in and that you research.
I enjoy paganism in general, so I do some research on that. My professional research is actually about the incidence of burnout in various library employees' experiences and ways to mitigate it. So nothing related to Halloween whatsoever, but I think it needs to be looked into.
So what would you say leads to burnout in library workers?
Fundamental reason to come work in a library, at least for a traditional librarian, is wanting to help people. And we do our darndest to get people whatever they need, whether it's an object or an answer or what have you. And that often leads us to working a lot more than is required by the job, putting in many more hours, trying to get everything as perfect as possible. There's a competition for funding, I guess is what it boils down to, too, making sure that we can have all the resources we want people to be able to use and not exhaust ourselves.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer Nardine. I really appreciate our conversation today and learning more about Halloween. I mean, I think so many people love Halloween, and I can speak for myself that I did not have that level of information and knowledge about the historical relevance. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.